My husband doesn't believe in ghosts, but on the night the tower light blinked to life through a dead power line and his cameras caught my silhouette climbing the spiral stairs while I slept beside him. He lay very still, turned toward me in the dark, and mouthed a word I couldn't hear.
Maybe my name.
Maybe, please? Maybe, for the first time since I married him, the word he refused, all that polite science, ghost. I rewound twice, he said in the morning. His voice as careful as his hands are when he measures floor joists or lifts a porcelain teacup by its whisper of a handle. 3 times. He angled his phone away, as if the image of me crossing the landing could embarrass us both. A glimmering figure in his night vision green, hair unbound, moving with the clean, habitual grace I never feel in daylight. Then why am I here? I asked, and wiggled my toes under the quilt until they found his shin. He was warm, even though the old lighthouse keeper's cottage we lived in ran on cold mornings in memory. The North Atlantic fog had curled around the glass all night, writing soft fingerprints. You tell me, Ethan said. He dropped the phone on the blanket between us. And I thought of all the odd things that arrive in marriages uninvited. Damp, mildew, half-heard music. Truths you carry like a smooth stone in your pocket, and a lie you told yourself so kindly it doesn't know it's a lie. I married him in brightness, a county courthouse that smelled of dry paper and lemons. A bouquet of clover and beach grass I had tied, giddy as a child with blue twine. He wore a suit without argument, the solemnity of a man who had learned that joy can be done sincerely. Everyone says we move fast, but fastest is sometimes just a word people use when they mean you did not consult their clocks. We live on a spit of rock at the end of the road, where the land remembers its first language and speaks it when the wind comes on shore. The lighthouse retired the year I was born. The Coast Guard stamped the brass plate with a date and a final weight of the lens. The tower still reaches like a white finger, a habit of pointing, and we live in the keeper's cottage stitched to it like a pocket to a coat. Ethan insists the tower's stone holds warmth. I insist it holds stories. In our kitchen, salt dries in a small bowl near the sink into crystals like winter stars. A drawer is full of keys that ostensibly fit nothing anymore and still rattle like a possibility. Ethan is a structural engineer who moonlights as the man small towns call when someone swears the house is haunted and the insurance company needs a word better than superstition for walls that breathe. Air pressure, he'll say kindly, standing in a doorway where a widow claims she felt a cold hand. He's not condescending. He respects grief and physics equally. He reads the ledger, he checks the foundation. He believes in things he can measure and record. Loads, spans, sheer strength, the way a beam fails in a noble arc if it must. I am, if you listen to gossip, the person he can't explain. I'm not a mystery to myself anymore, not exactly, but I was when he met me. A woman who didn't live in the town records before last fall. A woman with a new driver's license and a scar behind her right ear. A woman who knew the names of tides by taste and could braid a rope without looking. A woman who startles at the smell of wintergreen and can pluck a melody out of the air like she learned it in the womb. Rowan, I said to him the first day, offering my name like a gift I hoped he wouldn't question too hard. He took it with both hands. The first odd thing after the night vision version of me appeared on his phone wasn't strange at all. It was tea. I make the same every morning. Black leaves, a spoon of honey, a burden of lemon. I brewed 1 cup, turned to set it near the window, and there were 2. A second cup steaming, the honey not yet stirred. Did you? I began. I barely know where we keep the mugs, Ethan said. He was crouched by the cat's dish, adding warm water to dampen the clink of kibble. Tiller rubbed against his calf like a rope finding its cleat. Is this a test? No, I said and hid my trembling in a laugh. A miracle. Drink it before it gets shy. That afternoon, I found a music box in the pocket of my raincoat. Not the coat I had worn to town. The old one that hangs by the back door, used for scrub and fog. The box was small enough to hide in the closed palm of a hand, a square of pale wood with a key that my fingers turned before my mind caught up. The tune came out thin and tinny, like the song had been left in salt too long. I knew it, I didn't know why. My throat closed over air like a child learning to swim. It was that kind of knowing. When I told Ethan, he took the box gently and turned it over. New nails, he said. Not antique. These micro-scratches are from pocket sand. The salt line. Look. He lifted his chin toward the window. Fog pressed soft face to glass. Someone had this on the beach, my love. or near enough to taste the tide. He set up more cameras that week, not because he believed in ghosts, but because he believed we should not be at the mercy of our imaginations. He hid them cleverly, the way a kindly magician practices a trick until kindness and skill are the same. I watched him climb the narrow spiral of the tower stairs, careful of the thin cast iron and the way it sings underfoot. And I loved him the way I do when he has a tool belt on and a plan. He left one camera tucked into a shelf of the lantern room, just under the hood of the lens that hadn't turned for 30 years. He left another under the eaves by the back door, pointed at the path where deer tread in an obedient line and teenagers sneak up to smoke and pretend they are the first to understand longing. Who are we trying to catch? I asked, though the word catch felt wrong in my mouth, more net than invitation. He shrugged and smoothed my hair where the fog had made it damp. Patterns, he said. We're just catching patterns. The first visitor to show up after that was Finn, 16, beam of a body, hair too long for school and too short for rebellion, a sweatshirt advertising a band that had broken up before he was born. He hovered at the edge of the yard as if the grass belonged to someone else, and his feet didn't know what to do when they touched it. You should lock your side gate, he announced when I came out onto the porch. For raccoons and weird men. Which are you? I asked, my voice friendlier than my fear. Neither, he said, and gestured vaguely toward the sky where his drone made a higher, meaner version of a mosquito's complaint. I'm making a video about local folklore. Monetizing it. Don't worry, I blur faces. He shoved his hands in his pockets and squinted at me. Is it true you found a music box in your coat? Who told you that? I asked before I could stop myself. He grimaced. Everyone. It's a small town. Also, your husband bought motion sensors in bulk, and people like to talk about what other people buy because it's more interesting than what they're not buying. You want a cup of coffee? I offered because hospitality is sometimes a way of begging for a less dangerous topic. He glanced at the cottage, calculated how likely Ethan was to appear with a lecture about drone etiquette, then shook his head. Can I? He pointed toward the tower as if it had asked him a favor. Dad says it's closed, but he also says a lot of things are closed. He was chewing gum. When he spoke, wintergreen blew across the space between us like a tiny weather. Not today, I said. We're taking a break from folklore. He swallowed and glanced down the path. Just so you know, he said, no longer claiming indifference. There's a guy in a white SUV who's been circling. New York plates. Not a lot of those here in February. He had a camera. He took a picture of your mailbox. That's all. What did he look like? I asked. The way you ask when you know that making more specific is the difference between fear and prevention. 30, he said. Or 50. Those ages are the same to me. Clean, too clean. Like he thinks Rain is unprofessional. He smirked, happy to be helpful. I can get the plate on my footage if you want. We're fine, I lied politely. Tell your dad I said thank you for the drone warning. And lock your side gate. He stood a second longer, as if he remembered something before it was too late. My mom used to hum that song, he blurted. The music box one, I know it. I mean, not what it's called, but it's like waves that learned how to be a lullaby. He flushed, embarrassed by his own poetics, and took off down the path, stepping exactly in his previous footprints like the ground requested precision. That night I dreamed the tower light turned and turned until it learned the names of all the ships that had ever brushed our horizon, and then I woke to the smell of wintergreen again, sharp and medicinal, but softer too. When I padded into the kitchen, there was a note on the table written in chalk on a piece of blue sea glass. When it read, "Did you," I began, and then heard the shower upstairs come on. Ethan singing, that low, tuneless comfort he thinks is private. I touched the sea glass. Smooth, salt-burnished, the chalk line left my finger dusty. I looked around for more. Nothing. When? I whispered to the room, and the room did not answer. We fed Tiller and ourselves, and Ethan biked to town the long way because the main road was still under repair where the winter storm had torn it like a sheet. I vacuumed, which felt like an act of both faith and defiance. See, there is nothing, and also if there is something I will gather it and empty it into the compost like old bread. The doorbell rang. Don't hit me, the woman on the porch said cheerfully. She was the kind of beautiful I distrust. Expensive, symmetrical, confident like a woman who expects her coffee to hold a job. She wore a white pea coat that had met the ocean yesterday and forgiven it. She had a camera around her neck. Her smile turned up like a trick you acknowledge because the magician practiced. I don't usually do that, I said. Lucky for me, she said, and stuck out her hand. Addison Caldwell. Documentary television. Paranormal adjacent. We do it with rigor. Your husband consulted on a season about a haunted farmhouse. He was our resident skeptic/killjoy. Cameoed in a sweater. Big ratings. I want to talk to him about this place. You, the music box. We could do it without exploitation. My boss thinks exploitation is gauche. Ethan doesn't like cameras in his house, I said. Especially not ones he didn't put there. She laughed, big and warm, and glanced down the path where Finn had stood the day before. No offense, she said, but cameras are already in your house. I'm just better with sound, and ethics, and craft services. Listen, my inbox is lonely. Let me send you a proposal. Meanwhile, can I take B-roll? Exterior. One shot, no, I said, but softer. I was not afraid of her. I was afraid of the way she knew how to match her breath to the room's tempo. We're taking a break from folklore. She leaned a hip against the rail, letting the wind try to ruin her hair and fail. Her eyes went to the tower, up the long white reach of it to the black hooded shape that had scared 1,000 children into good behavior. You ever have the light flash when the power's off? She asked casually. I did a lighthouse season in Hatteras. Those lights remember. Makes the locals superstitious. It's a Fresnel lens, I said, trying on Ethan's voice. Prismatic. It can magnify a boat's light, the moon, a memory. She said. Romantic and wrong. My favorite combination. She touched the camera strap. Here's my card. For when your husband runs out of science. She was halfway down the steps before she spun back, quick as a fish. Hey, do you know a man named Gideon Hale? The name hit me like a drop of cold brine in the ear. Disorienting, high, oddly intimate. No, I said, my voice twice the space it should be. Should I? She tilted her head, reading me with the speed of someone trained in why other people lie. He's an archivist, she said like it was true. He helps me with maritime records. I think he was a lighthouse kid. See you? I watched her go until the white of her jacket became another temperamental wave in my periphery. I put the sea glass note in the drawer with the spare keys. Tiller cried at the door as if the house had turned to weather it couldn't name. I hummed to silence him without realizing it, and the tune tasted like the music box, like something you inherit without paperwork. When? I told the kettle when I made tea that afternoon. When what? At sundown, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the lantern room camera. The tower light glowed once, then died. The video showed my figure again, this time the profile of my hair in a messy knot, my right hand trailing the banister like I always do because I like the feeling of the cool iron brushing my fingertips. The timestamp was 4:42 while I had been in town, standing in the post office line behind a woman who smelled like library and a man who smelled like engine bay. Wires must have cross-fed from the generator for a split second, Ethan said that night. Not because he was trying to win, but because he felt responsible for offering explanations. He studied the footage frame by frame, his brow gentle, his mouth set the way people sit at a vigil, prepared to be kind longer than is comfortable. I'll check the breakers in the morning. And the silhouette? I asked too softly. Are you going to check me too? He lifted his eyes and saw me, not the problem. We'll check this together, he said. I trust you, Rowan. I don't know how to be married to you otherwise. On Thursday, the widow who lives in the tide-gray house at the bend of the road came to bring us a pie and a warning. Her name is Maeve, and she bakes like it's a religion, a kind of constant welcome you can cut into and share. She handed me pecan and said, Addison Caldwell is not careful with anyone's heart, including her own. You know her? I asked. Everyone knows everyone, she said, not coy so much as resigned. Also, my niece dated her once. Didn't end well. And if she asked you about Gideon, lock your doors. He's an archivist, I offered weakly, as if stating a myth helps neutralize it. Gideon Hale is a man who thinks the ocean is a god that likes tests, she said, her voice gentler than the sentiment. And he likes to be the one who controls the curriculum. He used to rent a house off the North Shore Trail. Talked about light like it owed him money. She lifted her eyebrows. You didn't grow up here, did you? Depends on what you mean by here, I said. But no. She nodded like a woman who had heard more complicated truths than most marriages survive. My husband kept that light, she said, before they retired it. He used to say it holds two histories. One for the ships and one for the girls who grew up under it. Remember that, if you feel like the stairs are counting you. I walked her to the path. The air smelled like the first cotton of snow imagining itself. If you need help carrying anything in a storm, she added out of nowhere as if she couldn't stop herself from mothering. Or if a car parks too long with its lights off. Or if your husband's out and you hear something you don't want to tell him you heard. I only hear gulls and the kettle and my own habit of singing, I said. But the lie felt small and obvious between us. She patted my arm, a motherly punctuation, and walked down the path with the pie tin clinking empty against her leg. That night, I left the bathroom light on because I was tired of asking the dark to be reasonable. At 2, a rattle shivered the glass. I sat up. The moon wore a sleeve of cloud. The tower was a patient shadow. On the landing, at the top of the first flight of stairs, a shape leaned against the wall. Nothing theatrical, nothing ragged. A woman stacked neat as a question she's heard before. "Hello?" I said, and my voice came out as someone else's voice, a child's or a version of me from a winter where I didn't have a porch to stand on. "Can I help you?" She tipped her face. Mine. Not quite. Close enough to be wrong. In the half-light, many things resemble other things. I told myself that. "When?" she said, and her mouth made a small, tired smile, the way my mouth does when I want to make something easier for someone else. "Rowan, when?" I stood. The floorboards remembered every pair of feet they had ever held. "Who are you?" I asked, and the woman's face made the expression I make when I am trying hard to be kind to someone I love who has started to irritate me. "Not a ghost," she said. "But he doesn't believe anyway." She tilted her head toward the bedroom. "You picked good. He's steady. I didn't think you would pick steady." The bathroom light died. I had left it on. The bulb chose the drama of the moment, fainted. The landing darkened, swam, steadied. The woman was gone. The house exhaled all on its own. I sat down on the hall rug and stayed there until Ethan, gentle with sleep and unafraid of the way my fear makes me slow, found me. "It's 4, he said. "You came to bed and left and came to bed." "You're cold." "There was a woman," I said. "She looked like me." He didn't say impossible. He put a blanket around my shoulders and made me tea, and when he brought the mug, there were 2. He didn't notice until I looked at them with my impossible face. "I must have boiled the water twice," he said, easy. "It's muscle memory now." When he went to shower, I looked at the keys in the drawer again. The sea glass no longer said Wen. The chalk had smudged into something like Wren. I am right-handed. I write like I have been told to be neat and compromise on speed. The sea glass last night had been lettered with leftward slant, each stroke a small defiance. The note on Monday had tilted the same way. At noon, Addison texted a screenshot, a grainy shot of Finn's drone capturing a woman on the tower's gallery, hair whipping, hand on the lantern frame. The angle was elegant, theatrical. The caption, "High winds at low tide." "I could give you a cut," she wrote. "We'd blur your face." I texted back 2 words, "No thanks," and immediately wanted to take them back because I sounded gracious, not frightened. She responded with a thumbs-up emoji and no words at all. When I asked Ethan about the white SUV, he surprised me by saying, "I know. It belonged to a man who came by my office this morning and asked for help finding his daughter." "He talked to you?" I set a plate on the counter without letting go of it. It was one of Maeve's with a faint pattern of blue shells circling the rim like an old sailor's prayer. "He wanted to be polite," Ethan said. "At first, he had photos." He said her name is Wren. "Wren," I repeated. The sea glass in the drawer sounded like it wanted to be part of the conversation. "He said she was taken from him as a child," Ethan continued. "He said the lighthouse is where she was last seen." He said all this with that particular style of calm that makes men look reasonable until you notice the vein in the forehead. "What did you do?" "I told him I couldn't help him trespass," he said quietly. "And I told him he needed to go to the sheriff if he thought a crime was in progress." He laughed. He asked if we had ever heard of hauntings that turn out to be family members trying to come home. He used the word wayward like we were grandparents in a Dickens novel. "What's his name?" "Gideon Hale," he said, and the name felt like a finger pressing a bruise. I heard the music box that night before I felt it in my pocket. The tune carried up the stairwell like a small boat at the end of its rope, bumping gently, insistently. I stood at the top of the tower stairs and looked down, and found no one. I went up to the lantern room because fear is a spiral and so are stairs. The lens loomed like an enormous jewel, a geometry of purpose that makes even cynics patient. I sat on the cold bench, knee to knee with the ghost of a keeper, and wound the key. It played with more clarity in the cold, like the room had tuned it. I remembered something then, not a scene so much as a color. Redcoats. 2 small girls in red coats with brass buttons like moons, a hand tugging my hand. A voice counting 1, 2 switch like a game or a code. The smell of wintergreen oil rubbed on raw knuckles. A lullaby without words, the first verse that never ended. I looked up and saw my face reflected in the lens glass. Behind it, a second face, indistinguishable from mine but not me. She breathed out and fog flowered on the cold pane between us. She wrote with her finger, "Wren, who are you?" I asked aloud, because if we were the only people awake in the world, it seemed polite to use our voices. Her mouth moved. "You." We held each other's gaze until we both flinched and looked down like girls who have been told not to be rude. When I looked up again, she was gone. The room was just a room, except for the sound the foghorn made at the point, like a ship clearing its throat before it forgives your foolishness. Ethan didn't say my name when I came back to bed. He just shifted to make the warm space bigger. By Friday, the white SUV had taken to parking by the turnoff and pretending to consult a map. We took to pretending we didn't see it. Addison circled less politely, her boots on our path like a woman who has never had to wait for anyone whose story she wanted. Finn's drone buzzed now and then, a high irritant we learned to treat like gulls. Maeve made us soup and told me about the time 2 girls were found in her garden when they were 4, wearing coats too heavy for early autumn and boots without socks. Old enough to know where they were, she said. Her tone a mixture of humor and the old ache that comes from memory that has learned to behave and still occasionally makes a dash for the door. Young enough not to know their last names for sure. They said they were Wren and Rowan. I believed them because it sounded like something a mother who loves a certain shape of word would do. "Did you call the sheriff?" I asked. "We did what we always do," she said. "We fed them first, and then—" "A man came," she said, looking out the window at the way the light looked poured instead of cast. He had eyes like a cold day on the river. He had papers. He called them his wards. He said their mother had died and he was full of scripture the way a person can be, like a clever parlor trick. We were tired. He was convincing. I told myself what kind people always tell themselves when a man makes a situation complicated, that my doubt wasn't kindness. I was wrong. We give ourselves such nice reasons for the times we should have been braver. "What happened to the girls?" I whispered. "The next morning," she said, her voice thin with held regret. "There was just one. I went home and opened the drawer with the keys and took the sea glass out and wrote under Wren, in my neat right hand, Rowan. Then I put the piece back, closed the drawer and sat down on the floor with my back to the cabinet, the way I did when I was a child, and trouble felt like weather I could outwait. Ethan sat beside me the way a person does when he has decided that the floor is where conversations tell the truth. "Talk to me," he said softly. "I think I had a sister," I said. "I think someone took her, or took me, or both." He exhaled like a man who's been holding his breath for a party trick and is allowed finally to be normal again. "Okay," he said. "We can work with that. Do you believe me?" He leaned his head against the cabinet so his face was turned toward mine. "I believe you when you talk about the way the fog sounds in the tower," he said. "I believe you when you say the left side of the bed makes you feel trapped sometimes, even though it's closer to the door. I believe you when you tell me your memory feels like a room where the lamp broke and you know how to walk without the light, but sometimes you still stub your toe. And I believe you when you say you think you had a sister." "I don't have proof," I said. "I don't have film." "You have a music box and a smell and a song," he said, "and a man in a white SUV. The storm came down from the north like a story that had been practicing its timing. The Coast Guard sent out warnings. The radio tuned itself to the old frequency where boys try to sound like men, asking the weather to treat them like colleagues. We put sandbags at the low door by the pump and barred the tower hatch the way the manual suggests, which made me happier about manuals than I have ever been. The cat listened to the change in the pressure and retreated to the laundry basket to become a loaf. Addison texted during the first squall, "We're doing a piece about storm shelters. Can we film the lantern room? Historical angle. I deleted the text because hope is sometimes a habit of saying nothing. Ethan stoked the wood stove in the parlor until it behaved like a good patient and didn't smoke. He kissed my forehead and then my mouth, and the second kiss made the first one make sense. "I'll go check the pump," he said. "Stay with the stove." "Don't fall in love with it," I said. But I was smiling because he had made the joke 100 times, and I never get tired of hearing men flirt with inanimate objects. The power went first. Then the wind came under the shingles like small, rude children. Then the tower hummed that low note it hums when it remembers the weight of the lens and asks the wind to move around it, please, instead of through. I sat on the floor with a flashlight and the music box and let the tune wind down in the quiet between gusts. When it stopped, I heard the other sound. Not the house settling. Houses do not settle in storms. More like a person who thinks she is walking softly and is not. I stood, but not too fast. I am good at standing slowly. I took the flashlight and walked to the kitchen. The back door was open a small, well-meaning inch. Not enough to be negligence. Exactly enough to be invitation. "Wren?" I whispered into the blowing snow. It was early yet. Snow still measured itself before it obeyed. "If you're here, I'm not going to chase you. I'm going to make tea." A sound answered me. Not words, but the acknowledgement a wild thing gives when it has decided you are not prey. I put the kettle on because sometimes doing something sensible is a way to buy time for courage, and turned instead toward the tower. The hatch we had barred hung open a little as if someone had convinced it to behave. On the second step, a handprint, small and narrow as mine, left in the grit of a house that believes in labor. Left hand. On the fourth step, a small brass key, salt-corroded, the shape of the lantern room lock, the key that lives in a dish under the lens and hasn't been used since the last keeper went home. The storm wind sucked and huffed at the seam, asking to be part of our conversation. I climbed because love sometimes means climbing when you are afraid, and you do not have to pretend otherwise. The flashlight made a tunnel, and my breath traveled in the tunnel like something eager and strange. At the first landing, I found a scarf I did not own. Red, brass buttons near the fringe. At the second, a music box with no key. At the third, nothing at all but the sensation of being watched by someone who hoped I would be braver than I know how to be. At the lantern room hatch, the key fit. It turned. The lock made a sound I've heard in 100 old houses, relief that someone finally asked it to be useful. The room was cold as a doctor's hands. Fog pressed hard against the glass, wanting to get inside. I saw her then, not in the reflection, in the real. She stood on the far side of the lens, hair in a low braid that made her look younger than I had any right to feel. She wore my sweater, which I had misplaced last week and blamed on the dryer. "Wren," I said. "Rowan," she said, and then we both laughed at the absurdity of hearing your own name in someone else's mouth. We stood like that for a dozen heartbeats, watching each other breathe like we were practicing for the same recital. Outside, the storm did that terrible, beautiful storming. We looked like saints in a church window, two of the same. "Are you—" We spoke at once and then stopped, each ceding the floor with awkward, automatic politeness. "You first," I said. "Are you happy?" she asked. I did not expect that. Not, "Are you afraid?" Not, "Do you forgive me?" Not, "What do you remember?" "Yes," I said, before I could overthink it. "I think so. It feels like happiness. I don't have much to compare it to." "The boy," she said. "He looks kind when he looks at you." "He is a man," I said, with the reflexive loyalty that surprised me. "He put in new footings under the porch and called it a date." "I believe you," she said, and her smile looked like something she had to unzip to make visible. "I did the stairs. I used to play there. I thought my legs would remember. They did." "Where did you go?" I asked, and immediately hated how it sounded in past tense, as if she were the only one who had left. "Where he told me to," she said simply. "But I came back when I could. I tried to leave signs. Do you remember the foghorn?" She lifted her hands as if to demonstrate its shape. We shared the gesture without meaning to. "I remember coats," I said. I lifted the red scarf between us. "And brass buttons." Her eyes did not change, but she did. She took a breath like someone going under. "He called them uniforms," she said. He said God liked order and only men knew what kinds there were. Hail, I said. I met his name. Never say it like you owe it anything, she said, sharp as a mother. Never give it your mouth if you can help it. He's nothing when people are not watching him. You have to make rooms where he isn't worth your air. How did you get the light to turn? I asked, because some questions require specificity as a comfort. There's no power to the lens. Isn't there? She said. He never really let things die. He says that's what lighthouses are for. Wren, I said, who are you to me? She touched the glass with her left hand and left a print briefly, a ghost that was real. Your mirror, she said. Your first story. Your person. Why when? I wanted to ask when you remembered me, she said, and there was nothing theatrical in her fear. I've been leaving the word everywhere because I thought it would bounce off the parts of your head that still worked. I thought you'd say, now, and then it would all feel like starting instead of ending. We looked at each other. It was quiet in the way rooms are quiet when the wind has taken all the other noises for its own. Down on the path, there was a new sound. A vehicle crunching snow with a driver who thinks he is the only person using the road. He's here, she said, but she didn't look scared. She looked furious. It made her even more beautiful, which in women always feels like an unfair advantage. And he brought a friend. She meant Addison. I didn't ask how she knew. Some combinations of scent, money and wintergreen and camera battery plastic are not easy to forget. What do we do? I asked, and she looked at me with an expression that would have made a stubborn child brush her teeth and a grown man apologize without requesting detail. Protect your husband, she said simply. Protect your house. The knock on the cottage door was polite. The voice was honeyed. Storm check, Addison called, cheerful like a good neighbor. We brought a generator and soup. Ethan had one hand on the pump switch and one hand on his radio. He looked up, saw the camera producer's silhouette framed in all that weather, and made the decision that made me want to kiss him forever. He didn't open the door. He reached for the staircase light to flash the agreed code, 1, 2, pause, 1. And then we lost power completely, and the tower breathed in a different register. It woke. Below, voices got harder. Addison's tone lost its winter market charm. This is a public safety issue, she called. We can't leave you up there in this. The county will be mad if we do. Ethan's voice carried up the stairwell like a rope. State your names. Addison Caldwell, Addison said, harnessing ease. And the man who has a right to be here, the second voice said, and even in the storm I recognized the oily flatness, the particular practiced righteousness of a man who believes he narrates reality. Open, son. You're in my way. Wren. Reached for the lever at the side of the lens, a lever no one had touched in 3 decades, and set it with a certainty that sang down to my bones. The room filled with light. Not from the lantern, though she had awakened the old thing enough to move. From the lightning, caught and multiplied across 100 slices of glass. It turned every snowflake into a separate star. They'll come up here, I whispered. They can't if they think you went down, she said. He likes stage and audience. We'll switch places, like the game. 1, 2, switch, I heard myself say, and my body remembered how to make the next part simple. We moved, an old choreography waking up in brand new muscle. Wren slipped down the first stair, soundless as fog. I stayed to wind the hatch shut and throw the bar she had lifted. The world below us continued to argue. Addison recorded, not helping, because that is what she knows best how to do. Gideon raised his voice. Wren, he called, pitching the syllable to be caught by children. Come on, you know better than this. Don't say it like a prayer, I said aloud, though he wasn't talking to me. Say it like a warning to yourself. Wren waited at the second landing. We looked at each other. It was the midpoint of a story I didn't know I had been telling, the exact hinge. We reached out. Our fingers touched. Electricity, real, invented storm, raised hair along my forearm. She smelled like wintergreen and wool and old soap. I wanted you to pick a man who would believe, she said, her mouth not moving much so the stairwell wouldn't catch the sound and retell it to the wrong ears. But I like that he's stubborn. Stubborn men learn how to be faithful as long as they learn how to be wrong.
He thinks you're a ghost, I whispered. And we both had to compress our laughter because tragedy does not survive joy nearby. He'll forgive himself, she said. And then she was gone into the dark below, and I was left with my breath.
And the sensation of my childhood running past me carrying a red scarf. I tucked myself behind the lens with the ease of a girl who learned to hide in plain sight. The light made everything that wasn't me brighter. I remembered the first time a ship turned because of me and survived, and I didn't know if it was mine or hers. I heard voices at the bottom of the stair. Addison was pleading in a tone you use when you want to sound like you care and are worried about the optics. Gideon was explaining a moral code with his fist against the wood. Ethan held the door. He has never raised his voice to me. He didn't enjoy raising it to this man. "This is my house," he said. "There's a storm. Come back." "She is mine," Gideon said, and made the word mine into a kind of profanity you can say in polite company without anyone arresting you. "I am not a violent person. I prefer kitchen knives to be for onions and fish. I believe in the utility of police and the greater reliabilities of neighbors. But there are sentences you hear with your blood, not your ears. When he said mine, everything I have ever done to make myself belong shook itself out of the corners and stood up. Let him say it enough and people give him the paperwork," Wren murmured into my hair. She had come up again without the stare complaining, a trick I resolved to force her to teach me when we survived. "It's a talent some men practice like violin. How did you live?" I asked before I could stop myself. "I left 1,000 times, she said. Some days I left to the cliff and counted gulls and came back. Some days I left to the neighbor woman and she fed me and gave me books and called the sheriff and he came and was tired. Some days I left to the cave and wrote on the wall and cried. I came here to the tower more times than I can count, and I counted good." I asked the light to save me. It wasn't lit, it did anyway. "We have to go down," I said, "because love is not only a concept. It is also a set of stairs we went together. At the bottom, Ethan had put his shoulder to the thick door and his hand to the handle. "Call the sheriff," he said to Addison with a precision that made her uncomfortable enough to obey. "You will record the man outside threatening to break into my home. You will not record my wife without consent. You will not step over the threshold. Are you the wife?" Gideon called toward me as if wives were a category men could address like weather systems. "Or the ghost?" He laughed, delighted with himself, with how entertaining he was to his own bad heart. I stood directly in front of the door and said nothing, because sometimes silence is the only language bad men don't speak. Addison fidgeted near the porch with the frustration of a magician denied a rabbit. "This plays so badly," she muttered to no one and everyone. "I'm the good guy here, and it still plays badly." "You could leave," Ethan suggested. She rolled her eyes like a 16-year-old with funding. "Then you will go viral without me," she said. "No thanks. It happened fast and slow like most ugly things." Gideon put his shoulder to the door. Wren made a sound like an animal. Ethan braced. I put my palm flat against the wood and remembered the weight of the door to other people's houses, the way they close behind you when you are small and the smell inside is wintergreen and soup and fear. My body took a step back, not away from the door, away from the version of me that waits for other people to manage the lock. "I'll go out," I said. "On the count of 3. 1. Rowan." Ethan's whole voice was a hand on my sleeve. I made myself not love him so hard in that second because I was afraid if I let it full weight me, I would sit down and never stand again. 2, I said. Wren's fingers slipped into mine with their cedar-smelling comfort. 3, I opened the door. The wind came in first, eager, dramatizing. Gideon got as far as the threshold and then stopped, because he has always wanted an audience and I denied it. I stepped through, shut the door behind me. It is a lie that you cannot shut a door on a storm. You just have to believe the latch. Snow arranged itself on the porch like it wanted to watch too. Addison, poor, foolish addict of other people's trouble, lifted the camera and then thought better and set it gently on the railing. "I will forgive her for that someday," Gideon smiled. He had teeth like an idea, straight enough to seem inevitable. He was a handsome man in the way money is handsome. It convinces you it is its own morality. "Wren Rowan," he said, making the two names into one because he could not abide the concept of difference. Do you remember? No, I said and meant it and also did not. He reached. I did not step back.
I am not yours, I said, as if I were reciting something I had learned under a blanket with a flashlight.
You don't own lighthouses because you know how to read the light. And you don't own us because you taught us a song. That's when he stopped smiling. The fight was not a fight, because no one moved quickly. It was a shift in the room's center of gravity. The wind took a breath, and in that breath, Wren opened the door from behind me and slipped her small body out onto the porch like water through a rock. Gideon, she said, and even the way she said his name was a kind of refusal. We're done. You're ungrateful, he said, and then he reached for her, and I stepped where he thought she would be because that is another trick we learned in the game. I moved my body into the space he wanted, and he grabbed my arm. It hurt. Not unusual. Not unmanageable. Ethan, who does not glamorize violence, opened the door further and stepped through and said, "Let go," in a voice that made the wind say, "Okay." Addison, who had more ethics than she rented out for ratings, said, "Hey," and came closer without aiming the camera. She smelled like cinnamon and cold. Gideon held me half an inch longer than decent and released. The sheriff arrived, Deputy Alana Pike, who has delivered babies in minivans and citations in living rooms where men measure you with their eyes. She took in the scene in a glance, the camera on the railing, the man with the good coat, the woman with the red scarf, the porch that wanted to be tree. She put her hand on the radio and turned it off because sometimes technology is a party crasher. "Everyone inside," she said. "Except you, Mr. Hale, you're coming with me." "For what?" he said, astonished. And if life were fair, it would be illegal to act astonished when you are asked to stop hurting people. "For trespass," she said, "and for making a nuisance of yourself during a storm. And for the other things, I will have paperwork for when I get you to the station and pull up 10 years of complaints that never quite had your name on them." He made a move then, a small suddenness that would have been a shove if Alana had been the kind of deputy who lets herself be shoved. She was not. She had Gideon face down in snow and handcuffed before he could say mine again. Addison filmed exactly none of it, bless her. Inside, Wren leaned against the wall and painted a picture of bravery with her breath. Ethan closed the curtains because curtains sometimes change the temperature of a room more than thermostats. I made tea like a person who has never been afraid of anything and spilled none of it. "This will not last," Wren whispered. "They will let him go. He is a master at petty and a student of almost." "We will make it last long enough," Alana said from the doorway, and the fact that she didn't promise anything harder made me love this town again. The dark night of the soul came later, when the power was still out and the tower moaned under the wind, and Ethan said, "You didn't tell me," and Wren said, "She didn't know," and I said, "I knew every day and every day I didn't." And we were all three correct. I wanted to believe we were ordinary, I said. I wanted to earn the right to be boring first. "I married you because you are not boring," Ethan said, soft. "And because you are good. But I need you to tell me when your history has a man in it who knows the color of our couch." "Blue," Wren offered, helpful like a little sister in a story who wants to make everything easier. "Sailor blue, not navy." "She will say things," I said, and now I was talking to Ethan and myself. "And everyone will feel like a trap or a rescue. We will decide which. We will not let anyone else decide which." The fair play reveal didn't happen in a courtroom or on a show. It happened on our long table with the scratches from 1,000 keepers' elbows. We put the evidence we had gathered on the wood, the sea glass with chalk-lettered Wren and Rowan, the music box that played a tune you could catalog, and a feeling you could not, the red scarf with brass buttons. Photographs Maeve found in a drawer she had pretended not to have, that showed 2 girls in red coats on a day the ocean knelt and agreed to be photogenic. Finn's drone stills of the lantern room where 2 pale faces pressed to glass looked more like loveliness than like fear. The spare key to the lens that had lived in a dish under the bench since the last year, a keeper kept this place and had somehow found its way to our stair. We laid out the bits like offerings, like children arrange shells by color and name them so that they have a better chance of being protected from the next tide. Grace, the chaplain from town, came with her CD of old hymns that she plays in rooms where the story is too loud and the people in it need a melody to hide behind for a second. She sat at the table with us and said, "Do you want to put his name here too?" And we all shook our heads, and she smiled like a woman who enjoys being told no by victims discovering their agency. Okay, she said. Then tell me the names you do want to put. Rowan, I said. Wren, she said. Ethan, I said. And Tiller, Wren added solemn, because some names are little and still demand respect. The next day dawned like it had been up all night making us a new bouquet and wanted to see if we would notice. The generator Addison had promised showed up in the back of a municipal truck with the sheriff's seal on it, like a joke about redemption. She asked to do something useful, Alana reported dryly. I told her she could try that for once. Gideon's lawyer made calls. His church, if that is what he was calling it this decade, published statements. Addison's footage would have made a good story if she had been the kind of person who believed the world exists for her to tell it. She surprised me by handing the card to Alana and saying, "This is not mine," like a woman who was trying a new personality on and finding it fit. Finn showed up with a casserole his mother had put under his arm. He hovered in the doorway and said, "I'm sorry I cried that one time when the power went out and I thought I saw a face." It was probably a reflection. There's nothing wrong with crying, he added quickly, terrified we might think less of him, and also, more Maeve came and cut the pie and told me a story about the winter the river froze so hard you could drive on it, and the time the light stayed lit anyway because the keeper's wife knew how to burn oil. We know how to keep things burning, she said. We just have to call it heat when men call it hysteria. They put Wren on a sofa bed in the parlor where she could hear the stove talk to itself. Ethan hung a curtain so she would have privacy and said, "This is our guest room now until it's your home." And I kissed him because few sentences live as brilliantly between those two ideas. The forced proximity was as literal and lovely as it sounds. The storm closed roads for a week, and we lived in a house that has always known how to put people together and make them find a good way to say good morning. We bumped hips at the sink and learned each other's tea preferences by osmosis. Wren uses honey only when she is nervous, and she taps her mug twice before she drinks. Ethan leaves his cup in the same place every time, the left side of the sink, because he likes to see it when he stands up. I sit on the floor with my back to the cabinet when I am thinking too hard. He sits beside me without asking if there is room. She perches on the lowest stair like a gull with opinions. At night, Wren told stories. At first, they were only about gulls, which was a kindness. Then they were about rooms where you learn to kneel for a different reason. She talked about a woman with gray hair who called herself Auntie and brushed her hair so gently you wanted to cry. She talked about a boy named Micah who ran away 5 times, and the 6th got as far as the road and then turned around because he could not bear the sound of the world. She talked about wintergreen salve on split knuckles and the way prayer sounds when a man whispers it angrily. "Why didn't you leave?" Ethan asked once, and then flinched at his own question because he has taught himself to be respectful and still sometimes forgets what questions make women feel like it's their fault for surviving. "I did," she said simply. "I left one hand at a time. I left in books. I left in songs. I left in your house. I left, and then I had to come get you. You saved me," I said, and she made a face like I had forgotten to add a carry in a simple sum, went to the sheriff's office when the roads allowed. It then gave statements that sounded like music when Grace was in the room and like a deposition when she was not. Paperwork moved like a gull that had eaten too much and needed to sit for a while. Addison apologized without hashtags. Finn subscribed to our YouTube channel even though we didn't have one. Maeve started dropping off vegetables labeled with recipes in her careful hand: carrot soup, 2 onions, patience. People brought phrases to the table: sister, cult, survivor, with their own handwritings, and we took the ones that fit and put the others in a drawer with the old keys. There was a day where I watched Ethan look at Wren and then at me and then at the line of salt that dries on the window when the wind shifts, and I saw him do the math men aren't invited to in polite culture. What does it mean to love a woman who used to be a girl you can't rescue because she rescued herself? What does it mean to share a kitchen with 2 versions of the woman you married and no law degree for the heart? He looked at me. He looked like he was making a choice, and it scared me because I don't like other people's agency when it's against my best interest. Then he got up, walked to the stove, poured more hot water into the kettle and said, "One day at a time, because he is inconveniently good." He kissed me on the loading dock of our life, which in our house is the back step where boots drip and you remember to love people when they look unphotogenic. He kissed me until the part of me that still thought I was a ghost remembered it had a mouth. He touched my face with his steady, measured hands and said, "You are my favorite mystery. which could have sounded like condescension if you didn't know him and felt like reverence because I do. The sacrificial choice wasn't dramatic. It was simple. The state offered to move Wren to a safe house inland while we figure out jurisdiction, and Wren, who has slept for years with one hand on the door, looked at the map and then at me. "If you go," I said. "I will go." "You're married," she said gently. "You have a cat who doesn't believe in anyone but you." "You are my person," I said. "The man I married believes in that even if he doesn't believe in ghosts." He did. He surprised me by suggesting it. "Go," he said, and he held both my hands as if he was showing the world he wasn't losing anything. "I will come in 3 days with a casserole and my toothbrush. Meanwhile, I will be here, convincing the sheriff to take this seriously, and the county to fix the lock on the lower hatch, and myself not to break Addison's camera in case we ever need it." We packed 2 bags. Maeve put in a sweater of her husband's that still smelled like ship chalk. Grace put in a CD of hymns and a note. "You can play this and not believe anything except that people like to sing together." Finn put in his drone and told us not to crash it. Alana wouldn't tell us the address we were going to and drove us in silence because sometimes silence is safer than empathy. I looked at the ocean the whole way as if it were a relative waving from a porch. The safe house was exactly like every safe house is. Clean, anonymous, furnished with furniture that has never had a family's knees. We slept in separate rooms and the air was full of someone else's unscented laundry soap. Wren did not lock her door, and I noticed, and I celebrated by not celebrating. We made oatmeal on an electric stove and sang while the pot watched us. On the 3rd day, Ethan arrived with the casserole and his toothbrush. He kissed me and then he kissed Wren's hair, which is a thing I didn't know I wanted to see until I saw it. "Deputy Pike says the judge liked our evidence," he said. "She says this will take as long as a baby does, and we should not get discouraged when our bodies can't tell the difference between new and late." We took a walk, because bodies require weather to make sense of themselves. We bought bread at a bakery where the man behind the counter had a tattoo of a wing on his forearm, and beyond that, we did not write anyone's backstory because we were practicing minding our own. We came back to the safe house and found the door ajar. It was Addison. On the table, she'd placed a hard drive and a bag of groceries, like the offering of a raccoon trying to earn good behavior. She had a bruise on her cheek she was pretending to ignore. "He has friends," she said without preamble. "He has donors. He has a mailing list and the skill of sounding reasonable in the middle of other people's crazy. I don't want to make TV about this anymore. I want to help." "You already helped," Wren said, and Addison flinched, as people do when their better self is introduced to them like a surprise party. "We gave Addison tea because we are not barbarians." She gave us the footage she had, of Gideon at our door, of Wren's silhouette in the tower, of me standing on the porch like a person in her own story. "Use it sparingly," she said, surprising me again. "Use it like a flare, not a bonfire. He loves bonfires." After that, the story unscrolled like a rope. The state believed us. The county took a while and then did. The town had believed us from the beginning and now was forced to say so on paper. Gideon made himself small and then a judge made him smaller. He will come back in some shape. Men like him always do. He will use synonyms. He will try a different coat. He will call himself a caretaker when he means a thief. We will be watchful, not haunted. The ending is not a door slamming. It's more like a lamp turning on in a room you've always used and only now notice is beautiful. We went home. The tower was not offended. Wren made short work of the spare room and then made longer work of the idea that she deserved it. Ethan built her a shelf exactly at the height she prefers because he has made a worship of learning our lengths. Maeve brought us a plant that might survive and a pie that didn't need to. Finn made us a video, a love letter to our house with no people in it, only light. On the first clear night after the storm, we climbed the tower together because sometimes you must do the obvious thing. The lens knew our faces. We opened the hatch and stepped onto the gallery. The world was black and white in stars. We could see the ferry as a string of lamps and the river as a muscle. Wren put her hand on the railing and said, "When?" And I said, "Now." And Ethan said, "Always." And then we all laughed because people don't say always without irony anymore, and maybe we will help bring it back into fashion. He kissed me there, above the rocks in the place where I learned my first song, and the man who thinks he wrote it. It wasn't a dramatic kiss, though the wind tried to make it one. It was a steady kiss, the kind that builds a house and calls it a home. Wren leaned her head against my shoulder in that sister way that feels like a heartbeat, making room for another heartbeat and not minding. When we went inside, the tower hummed the way old buildings hum when they've had a full day and are pleased with their decisions. The cat met us at the bottom step like a toll. We paid him in fish. We made tea. I made 2 cups, then 3. The music box sat on the table. I wound it. The song came out thin and brave. My husband still doesn't believe in ghosts, but he believes in me when I say I am not something you can explain with air pressure and doors swelling in rain and misaligned hinges. He believes in my sister when she says he is allowed to laugh in our kitchen as long as he knows she knows the joke first. He believes in houses that hold and lenses that magnify and the delicate, stubborn mechanics of love. He believes in the patterns we catch together. If a ghost is a story that refuses to be over, then maybe we are haunted by our own insistence on continuing. Maybe that is the only haunting I will ever insist on. If you come up the path on a cold day, you will smell wintergreen and wood smoke, and the particular salt the ocean uses when it is happy with itself. If you stand at the base of the tower and tilt your head back until the heavens say enough, you might see 2 figures near the glass. If you listen, you might hear a song that sounds like a lullaby that learned to stand up and fight. If you knock, we will let you in. We will give you tea. We will put your name on the table with the other names and find a way to make them fit. We are not ghosts. We are a light.